Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. This week we're taking the Jewish view of the Parsha of the week is Chaya, Sara, the life of Sara. Now what does it mean? Let's get the context and get the situation framed. And that is that Abraham and Sara were the first Jewish people. And what we're going to see is that Sara was a very great tzedekis, which means a rich, very righteous woman. And it says at the beginning, the life of Sara, she was 127 years old. Well, why did you have to say 100 years, 20 years, 7 years? It's one word, 127 years. So the Rashi, of course, is the major commentary to start off with, and then, of course, we always go deeper. But to start off with basic Chumash and the Rashi is just that when she was 100 years old, you say, well, you get so many things and ups and downs in your life, but she was as pure as a 20-year-old, and a 20-year-old is, she was 20, she was beautiful like a 7-year-old. So each stage of her life was something very special. And then it says these are the years of Sara. And why do they have to repeat it? You just said how old she is. And again, Rashi explains to us that all of them were good. I don't know if we can fathom that. Think about that for a second. That a person, like I say, has their ups and their downs. They're depressed. They mess up. Everybody messes up. Nobody is perfect. But here we're dealing with Sarah, our first matriarch, and she was totally good. She was totally a perfect woman. And that's something, it's hard to imagine such a person like that. It isn't your regular person in the street, to say the least. But this is what we're dealing with. These are the beginning founders of the Jewish religion, Abraham and Sarah. Now, Sara actually is very interesting. She lived, as we just said, to 127 years old. And how did she pass away? And it was that, and then we have to frame the situation, like I just said in the last week's section, was that Abraham was told by the Almighty to sacrifice Isaac. And again, actually we talked about it last week, and obviously there's no such thing as a human sacrifice in Judaism. It's barbaric and it's ancient. But in any case, that he said, well, wait a minute. He says, I'm ready to slaughter him. He says, no, don't you do that. And the Almighty that says, stop. So then they sent a messenger back to Sarah and said, well, you know that Abraham was about to sacrifice Isaac. And she just fainted, dropped, really. Some say different ways, because obviously if a mother hears that her son is ready to get killed, that obviously is traumatic and worthy to faint about and go into a coma. And on the other hand, that she was such elated, just like Isaac was, that her son became a sacrifice to the Almighty. Actually, it's interesting. Just a side story. I always have a story about everything. That I was in yeshiva. And again, if people know about the Lubavitch Bochum, I mean adults also, they go out Friday afternoon, and not only they do study the whole week, but not in their free time. In a way, it's their free time, but they still use it to serve the community. And they went to go to hospitals, to old age homes, people in the street, to shopping malls, etc. So someone calls up the yeshiva, and I get the phone. And I said, well, you know, they're looking for their son. They figure it's for free time, so they want to talk to their son. We were in Florida. They were in New York. So I says, well, he's in the hospital. And then we were talking, well, he'll be back soon. So someone came over to me and said the same thing. He says, you know, you have to be careful the way you speak. That, you know, I meant that he's helping people out, patients in the hospital. That's, of course, what I meant. But he says, from your words, he's in the hospital. People could take it the wrong thing. You know, maybe the son's in the hospital. What happened to him? You know, it's a traumatic statement. So again, almost the same thing. You have to watch your words. You say the wrong thing. He's in the hospital, but he's mentioning my kids. You know, one of my 10 jobs is I visit inmates in prison. So when they were younger, the kids, you know, people would call up and say, "Where's your father?" He's in jail. Well, of course, I was visiting prisoners in jail, but in any case, that the people would joke around. What do you think? Your father's in jail? Again, you have to be careful your words. In any case, that was all a side little light note. And again, that Sara was an incredible person, and we have to keep that in mind. And I know I say it many times, but I think it's worthy to say it so often, is that, again, people think that Judaism and Torah, they put women are in the back seat, they're not intelligent, they're not important, all these kind of attitudes which are totally incorrect. And just every time I come up to an idea which shows how incorrect it is, I do want to emphasize it, and which I'm doing here. It's not like she's a schmo, Sara, just all she does is sit in the kitchen and cooks dinner. But here she is a greatest, righteous person that all her days are full of righteousness. And like I say, I don't know if we could even comprehend what that really means, because who doesn't have problems and issues and bad days and slip up here and there. But here she was totally good. All right, so that's enough said. So now the next situation is that Sara has to find Abraham has to find a burial plot for Sarah. Again, now we have Jewish cemeteries, but even then, I mean, if you talk about 100 to 150 years ago, Jews didn't have so many cemeteries, and they had to look around for a plot of land. But in any case, surely they were the first Jews. They surely didn't have a Jewish cemetery going around. So they picked out this Marsa Machpelah, which is the cave, a double cave, literally. That's what it means, in the city of Hebron, which is still there. Surely it's still there today. And the graves are still there, and the caves are still there. It's a very holy site for the Jewish people. It's one of the holiest cities. In any case, for mystical reasons also, because not only was it an interesting burial place, but it was where Adam and Eve were buried also. So they wanted to be buried. It's a very special thing to be buried with righteous people. And therefore, I mean, again, there's holy significance in this very holy place. So Abraham wanted to bury Sara, his wife, there. But it was bought by Ephron. People were living there just because Abraham came in there. Other people were living there. So they started negotiations. Now you have to remember also, again, framing the situation, Abraham wasn't just some guy going around on a farm, but he was already known and renowned to be a very special holy person. He went to Egypt, and the king there knew that he was very special. We talked about that story last week, and Avimelech. People around knew that he was a very, very noble character for many of the stories we said in the last Parsha in the last week. So now Ephron, the place goes to Ephron. They have to say, well, this is your land. It's very interesting, and Abraham says, well, I'd like to have this piece of land and buy it from you for a burial place. So Ephron had a big mouth, and he just said, for you, no problem, whatever you want, like whatever it is yours. But at the end, Abraham had to sell it he bought it for 400 big coins. The coins today, a dollar's a dollar, whether it's a crumpled dollar or it's a brand new dollar, a dollar's a dollar. But in those days, they had different coins, big coins, little coins, gold coins, copper coins. So all kinds of coins going on. But he paid the best coins, 400 of the best coins, he bought it for. And again, an important lesson for us is just not to be like this person Ephron. He told, don't worry about it, do whatever you want. In the end, he took top dollar. So again, that's the way that regular people are, not to be like them. They talk a lot but do nothing. On the other hand, the proper way is to speak a little and do a lot. If someone says, who's going to do it? Oh, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be on the committee and I'm going to help out. All right, that's very nice. But then you see sometimes they don't even show up for a meeting. On the other hand, there's people don't say too much, but they go and they get their hands dirty and they help out in whatever situation and that's needed from them. And that's the proper way. Better to speak little and just do a lot. And that's another important lesson for us also. But again, as we always try to go on the mystical, deeper reasons for things. Why 400? Again, at a simple level, that's the amount he paid for. 400 is 400. But everything in the Torah could be looked at is at a deeper level. And anytime I'm just telling you that there's a number that shows that should lighten up your eyes and know a red light to say, hey, there's something very significant. We have to look into that. So 400, again, is very interesting. It's 440, 400. Again, we had, of course, 40 days, 40 nights of the flood. 400 is also very important. We're going to have Esau, we'll talk about that in a few weeks, that accompanied him to beat up Yaakov, which he never did, of course, but in any case brought 400 men. So this 400 is a very significant idea, and one of the reasons is deeper ideas is that there are four spiritual worlds. There's really myriad and thousands of worlds, but four general worlds. And 100 is, again, a very round number because each of the worlds has 10 spheros and the emanations. And 10 by 10 is 100, and so therefore times that by 4 worlds, that you get 400. So he was on the level of giving him everything and buying it for 400, these golden coins, which was very, very significant. And it just not just a number, a big number, as we said, but it was very deep and significant why he brought in exactly the 400. And of course, that there's another idea behind it. It's because ultimately, we know the end of the story, that the Jews ultimately were in bondage. We'll talk about all these things, the deeper significance of it later on. They went into Egypt, and then they came out of Egypt, and they conquered the land, and that's the book of Joshua. So they took over the land because they kind of took over and beat up everybody. So people could say it's not nice, it's not the right thing, why are you throwing everybody else out of the land of Israel? But they say there's 3 places, the Talmud says, where no one can argue, because if you bought it, you bought it. No one's throwing you out. If you have a deed, and someone takes over, squats on your land, and you say, hey, get out of my house. I was in Miami Beach for 6 months, and all of a sudden you found someone living in your house. They obviously, oh, well, what's the reason? Why can't I live here? It's my house, just because you started squatting on it. So again, no one can argue about it. One of them is a Hebron. Hebron, they say in the Hebrew, it's a guttural H, but in English, it's H-E-V, Hebron. In any case, that Avraham bought it. Bought it is bought. It's yours. You can't say someone stole you stole it if you bought it. So actually, there's very big contentions nowadays in Israel about that. But really, what's more important is that it was always Jewish hands. It was bought. I mean, even if you conquer something, it's your land also. America's America, even though they beat up the Native American. It's legally theirs. A Native American can't come and say this is where I put my teepee in 200 years ago. There wouldn't be anything legally significant in that, and so to the Jewish people. But even then, even if you'll say it's not nice and not right, on the other hand, that it's a matter of if they bought it, it's yours. Who can argue against it? Someone bought it, you bought it from someone without compulsion, then that it's yours. So that's another important lesson that we can learn. Now that Isaac was almost sacrificed, so Abraham says, I'm going to be left without any Jews over here. So how do you get more Jews? You get your son married and let them have kids. And so he says, well, now I have to check out, and I have to, get a girl. Now, interesting, he sends Eliezer. Now, this Eliezer was a faithful servant. He learned a lot from Abraham. He taught to a lot of people the teachings of Abraham, and so Abraham sent him to his homeland, which is probably around Iraq today. But he didn't say, well, what do we have to schlep to Iraq? We're in Israel. Why don't we just find a local yokel girl right here? He says, no, I don't want the Canaanite people they're not the proper people for my son. Go to my hometown and found the right girl. So actually very miraculous, because it says he traveled, kafitza saderek is the words in the Hebrew, meaning jumping the road literally, meaning he just came a 17 days travel. Today it's not an airplane ride. I mean, today is a few hours anyway. But in those days, it was 17 days to schlep, and he did it in one day. And he brought all Abraham's wealth with him, because that showed the significance that he was going to give his whole life and Jewish life to all the Jewish people that come were all from Abraham, then over to the next, his wife, Isaac's new wife. So I only have to know who am I going to pick out. But it's very interesting. They met at the well. A lot of, again, I always bring in a little cute joke over here. People say you want to meet a girl or to marry them, you meet them at the watering hole. Maybe you have a drink with them. All right, it's a side little joke. In any case, that he did go to the well, and it just shows Rivka showed up. You can't say miraculously, she just showed up, but it was by total divine providence right then, and she was very nice. So, because again, when you look for a wife and a girl, the Gemara says someone who has midos tovos, good character. You want someone to live with a good character, but obviously that's going to be your children, or you can't say, well, my children, it's two to tango, and the children are going to either take after your wife, or number two, she's going to lead them in the proper way. So you want someone with good character. And where's her good character? She says, now I'll give you a drink of water, I'll take care of your animals also. So she was very kind, and it's the proper Jewish thing. And again, as I always try to bring out, I said it before, but here's another idea where people think that the Torah people only care about themselves. It is a mitzvah to take care of your animals. On the contrary, you're really supposed to feed your animals even before yourself to sit down to dinner. And that's what she did. She took care of the animals, which shows already she had very good character. They're so nice not to be mean to animals, and that was very important. And then she said, well, come home. I mean, she had a father, she had a brother, and was saying, well, meet them. He says, I'm taking her back. Now, this was a jump in faith, because first of all, show me a picture, or, maybe people today, show me an Instagram about this guy. Who's this guy Isaac? I don't know from him. Again, they were living in a totally different land, and I mean, even today, some of the land, again, like I say, you have internet connections. In those days, it's like you're living like on the moon. How are you supposed to know from Iraq to Israel? So it was a leap of faith, but Rivka, again, was very important that she just said, this is the person for me. I know for these holy, and she went with Eliezer. Now, it's another idea. I mean, I just emphasize it. I'm going to say it 1,000 times, how important women are, because I know it's a bugaboo amongst a lot of people, and so therefore I just want to remove that thought from most people's minds. So it says Rivka, actually it's an issue also, but she was 3 years old. 3 years old, a little baby in nursery school. But again, we're dealing with very, very special people. Sometimes I try to explain it. I mean, again, I don't know if I haven't found it, but you have like a Mozart at 7 years old composing. How can you compose 7 years old? A little kid is playing chopsticks on the piano. How do you make a composition like a Mozart? So there are geniuses in the world, and there's superior people that they could do that. So again, same idea with Rivka. Even though she's 3 years old, she's not beyond mature. You don't say mature, but very holy and very, very, very special. In any case, she went with him, and now it's very interesting. One of the mitzvahs that are incumbent upon Jewish women is to light Shabbos and holiday candles, meaning Friday afternoon, right 18 minutes before sunset. Every Jewish woman should light candles. Now, not only Jewish women, but Jewish girls also. I mean, what age? 3 years old, as we know, the kids go to nursery, they can say a blessing, they can articulate. So around 3 years old, Jewish girls start lighting also. So she came into Israel, and she started lighting candles too. And a miracle happened that, again, these are miracles happened to our forefathers and matriarchs, that the candles lit from one, I mean, it wasn't just a big bowl of oil, but it was a miracle lasted from one Friday night to the other. And here it was that Sarah, when we're talking about, she's a matriarch, an older person, all right, she's holy, we just said. And here you have a 3-year-old girl come in. Who's she compared to, I mean, maybe she's smart, and maybe she's a genius, and maybe she's mature. But what did she do in her life that made her so righteous? But here, even a 3-year-old girl has the same miracle as her mother-in-law who passed away, but she had the same miracles happen to her. And that's a very important lesson for us, that, again, people sometimes, kids, you're just a kid, who are you, you don't know anything, just wait till you grow up, and that is not a Torah idea also. Yes, children have to respect their parents and teachers, saying that can't be chutzpanyaks, but on the other hand, they are very special, and actually it says in the Gemara that the hevel, the breath of children, that learning Torah reaches, has no sin, because there can't be accountable, they're just children. And in a deeper sense, which we like talking about here, it reaches, we talk about 4 worlds, the highest spiritual world of Atzilus, that they're so pure. So children are super duper important, and this is a lesson also. Even a Jewish girl says, all right, so she's a 3-year-old girl, what is she? But no, everything is very important, and even for little kids, whatever they do and what they learn and what they feel is very important also. All right, so moving on, is we just have now, we have Isaac living with his wife. Actually, they only got married once she became bas mitzvah, waited 10 years, and then they did get married. In the meantime, they were engaged. So now Abraham is an older man, and one other thing is, we said that he had 2 sons, one Ishmael, and the other one we just said was Isaac, of course. Now, Ishmael was a little bit of a Vildachai. We talked about this last week, and Sarah, again, knew about her children better than the father, really. And she says, get rid of him. He's a bad influence to my real good son, Isaac. And Abraham, actually, God said, listen to her, listen to the voice. That's the word, listen to the voice of Sarah, because she knows she's on the ball with this. Again, she knew more than even Abraham. Her prophecy was even greater than Abraham. You get the point. I mean, again, she's very, very, very special and holy. Yeah, but in the meantime, Ishmael, says, hey, I'm the older kid. He was 13 years old, really, when Isaac was born. And there is an idea in Torah that firstborns do get double portions. We talked about that once upon a time, not to get into the whole idea here. But there is something special about being a firstborn. So you say, hey, I'm the firstborn, I'm number 1 around here. But of course, Sara felt that Isaac was the real Jew, which of course he is, and therefore he's the most significant. But then we see at the end that it says that Abraham lived in his old age, he lived 175, and still that Ishmael understood when they came to bury Abraham, he had 2 sons, that Ishmael understood. He understood that Isaac was very special, and that he gave him significance ahead of him. So therefore, that's beautiful when you see your children getting along, number 1, and they know their place, number 2. I mean, really, all Jewish children are very special in that sense. Here, it wasn't the same idea, but still, just to see your children getting along is the biggest nachas, one of the biggest pleasures for any parents, which shows us it. That's what it says, that Abraham had total pleasure in his old age, seeing his 2 sons, which were a little bit fighting when they were kids, but nevertheless that they're feeling good, and they recognize each other, who they were and what they were. And Yishmael did get a blessing. He had 12 sons, princes, as actually says. So he did get a blessing in his own right, even though he was sent away. It wasn't he was sent away to be a bum. He was ready, he had a significant amount of people and kingdoms. Not all the Arabs today are from Yishmael, because obviously there were other people besides Yishmael in those days. There were other people in those civilizations, so not everybody could say I come from Yishmael. But still, at those times, and probably today too, I don't know who they are, and I don't know if anybody does, but they have a very big significance, and that's very important for us to remember that also. Now, a few last ideas in Chaya Sara that really, and the Rebbe brings this out a lot, what you are in your name shows on who you are. Not name, okay, your name is Harry, your name is this guy is a horse. But everything in Hebrew has very deep significance, and therefore that even the name of a Parsha, Sedra, also has very big significance. So Chaya Sara means the life of Sara, but really the idea is that it's talking about her death, as we said before. So, but all these things really are permeated with her life. What are we talking about? We said that find a burial place. This is very important in Judaism also, and it hurts me when people die and they say, well, they're dead and gone, and who cares what happens, we can cremate them, doesn't make a difference. And that is not a Torah idea at all, that a person's neshama, their soul, does live on, it's connected to their body did good deeds in this world, and therefore, even after they pass away, that they still have their life to be carried on in a spiritual sense, and really in even a very deep idea that they have a really significance even in our physical world. They're not just in the Garden of Eden high up in the sky, but they have influence down here also. So that's an important part. And then we said the idea of Yishmael, her son, carrying out that Isaac should get married and, like I said, have children, which obviously we're all from Abraham and Isaac. So continuing the Jewish people, that's super important for Sarah also. She's the first. There are 4 matriarchs, but she's the first, of course, so that's very significant also. And then we say that during her lifetime that she had an influence on people, but really even after she passed away, that she had significance on the influence on a lot of people. And therefore, you see, the Chaya Sara, which literally means the life of Sara, really wasn't just her physical life, which we said ended up after 127 years, but she had influence on many, many things. And really for us today, that she is our matriarch, she is their mother, and therefore that she really stands in good stead. I'm sure in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, the patriarchs and matriarchs are pulling for their children. I know it's 4,000 years later, but time doesn't mean too much in any case. And when you're in heaven in the Garden of Eden, and number 2, ultimately we are the progenitors of all those great patriarchs and matriarchs. So we talked about a lot in this parsha. Hope you enjoyed it, because I enjoyed teaching, and hopefully we'll talk to you next week, and we'll have an idea on the weekly parsha. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Jewish View.